Good morning. We're live. We're live for the latest webinar from Bamford Media. This is raising your financial planner profile with press and PR. If you're on the webinar, please do say a quick hello in the chat box on the side of the screen, the right-hand side of the screen. You can open and ask questions at the bottom of the screen, so scroll down to do that. But I'll get underway. I apologise in advance for the slightly croaky voice. I'm at the tail end of a chest infection this week, which really knocked me for six, and it's made doing things like this and recording podcasts and things quite challenging. But there we go. Right, let me see if I can bring the slides back up, which is this one here. So bear with me a second. It's that one there. I will learn my way around this system at some point. Okay, here's my slides. And you probably want to see my face as well, which is this one there. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to be covering 5 main areas in the webinar this morning, although I do want your questions as well. So I really want to tailor this webinar to the things that you're interested in, the things you're concerned about, etc., etc. Good morning, Ian. So 5 main areas are why do it in the first place? Why start speaking to personal finance journalists, sharing your opinions in the press, becoming a media advisor? What's the purpose of it? What's the value of it? I want to slay a few myths about journalists. Matt, good morning. There's loads of misconceptions out there about personal finance journalists, about who they are, what they do, how they do it. Noel, good morning. Welcome to the webinar. So I want to slay a few myths, which I'll get onto in a second. I want to talk about what the press is, because the nature of the press, the very nature of the press, has changed an awful lot in recent years, certainly since I started doing this back in 2002. So what are we actually talking about when we're talking about raising your profile with press and PR? How to get started. I've actually asked some journalists I know to give me some tips to share with you for this, so you hear it straight from a horse's mouth, what you can do to get started as a media advisor, and then what to do with it when you actually get your comments in the press. How to make the most of it, how to get some value out of being a quoted media advisor. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, what on earth does this guy know about this subject? This is where I establish my credibility with you. This is where I tell you why I know about being a media advisor, how to do this stuff. So I became an IFA in 2002. And more or less the first thing I did when I became an IFA was to start speaking to my dad, Nick's media connections, his journalist connections. So they would phone the office, he'd be out seeing a client, and I'd have a chat with them instead, and I'd become a quoted media advisor. So I've been doing this a lot since 2002. Haven't really stopped since then, haven't taken a break from doing it. In an average year, I'm having between 200 and 300 conversations with personal finance journalists in a year. Last year it was 240, so I keep a log of every single one, who I spoke to, which publication they're writing for, what the subject was, when it's published, if it's consumer or trade, etc. So 240 last year. To date this year, I'm up to 93. So where are we today? The date is the 11th of April. 93 conversations so far this year. And over the years, I've been quoted in every national newspaper in the UK, even the News of the World, which was an experience, and also BBC and commercial radio. I've not done any television yet because television is terrifying, but I'm very happy to go on radio, very, very happy to be in print, print news, so all the national newspapers, the Times, FT, Telegraph, Observer, Guardian, etc., all of them really. And I've picked up a few awards along the way. Last year I was a finalist for the Expert of the Year at Headline Money Awards. Headline Money is the main personal finance journalist portal. So that was voted on by personal finance journalists. I've previously picked up IFA of the Year at the Unbiased Media Awards for my work with media work. So that's where I stand. That's where I'm coming from, and hopefully what I share with you today is an accurate reflection of my experience as a media advisor, and can help you get started as well, as a media advisor and making those first steps. So, what are journalists? Who are we actually speaking to when we speak to journalists? I hear this quite a lot from IFAs. The reason they don't speak to journalists is because they truly believe some of these things. So, firstly, journalists are not out to do a hatchet job on you. Some IFAs I speak to, some financial planners I speak to, are genuinely scared of personal finance journalists. They think they're looking for a way to twist the story, to expose bad practice in your firm, etc. They're not. They're really not. Their main purpose is to educate readers, is to inform readers, is to publish things that people want to read. It is not to do a hatchet job. Now, I think the journalism profession may have picked up a reputation from the 1970s, 80s, when there was an element of that going on. Journalists were quite terrifying people. They were exposing wrongdoing in public office, in corporate life, etc. But the personal finance journalists we're speaking to and we're dealing with are not out to do a hatchet job on you. So we can cross that one off straight away. They don't spend their lives at lunch. I think there's this sort of caricature of a journalist that they like their long boozy lunches. They are social creatures. They network a lot. They do attend lunches and dinners and awards and breakfasts and all sorts of things because that's part of their role. It's getting out there. It's finding the stories. It's nurturing connections for people who can comment and relationships to find stories. So there is an element of that. But in the main, the personal finance journalists we speak to are very, very hardworking. They're always up against tight deadlines, and we'll come on to that in a minute, what that means, why that's so important. But they certainly do not spend their lives having long, boozy lunches. Most of them, anyway. I think a few of them might still do that, but in the main. And also, they're not always subject matter experts. Now, a few of them are. A few of them have levels of expertise that far exceed your expertise, my expertise on a particular subject. But in the main, they are generalists. They've got a good, broad understanding of personal finance and the financial services sector. But it's up to you to make sure that the comments you put across are in the right context, that they're easily explained. One of the tips that I'll show you later was someone saying, don't use jargon. So don't assume there's a detailed level of knowledge on a particular technical subject when you're speaking to journalists. They're not always subject matter experts. Now, for some of the trade press, I know are going there doing the exams with CII. I know a few have got the investment management certificate, so they are picking up these technical skills. But don't assume that when you speak to them in the first place. Another one I didn't put on this slide, but I think it's important to mention. I hear this all the time from financial planners, which is they'll misquote me. Now, that happens sometimes. Sometimes you have a conversation with a journalist and they get your words wrong. They don't say what you were trying to get across. And sometimes that's your fault for not communicating it in a clear, concise, accurate manner. Sometimes it's their fault because they scribbled it down. During a long conversation, the bit they scribbled down wasn't an accurate reflection. It does happen sometimes. I think when it does happen, you've got to shake it off. Don't sweat the small stuff. It doesn't really matter unless they've taken you saying, I don't agree with this pension annual allowance change to I'm a mass murderer or something. Don't worry too much about being slightly misquoted on something. Don't complain about it, and that's something else I'll come on to talk a bit about later. So that's who we're dealing with. Journalists are a range of people, a really wide range of people. Some are college, university leavers, so in their 20s, first job out of higher education. Others are more experienced and have been through different trade publications, consumer press, maybe some freelance work, maybe some PR work. And again, I'll talk a bit about the blurring of the line a bit between the two. So get to know them as people. Don't make assumptions about their experience, about their knowledge. But don't worry, they're not out to do a hatchet job on you. So that's really slaying if you miss, just to get started. So what is the press? What are we talking about here when we're talking about raising your profile with press and PR? The press, the nature of the press has massively changed, certainly since I started doing this in 2002. And that change has accelerated a great deal since then as well. So when I started, the press that we were used to were predominantly print publications. And that would mean once a week, or in some cases once a month. So there wasn't this same urgency around getting comments by a certain deadline. You had a bit more time to consider things, to research things, to actually formulate your opinion, to edit it down properly. Now, the shift that's happened is away from print, and there are still print publications, but they're dramatically different now. And it's online. Every single story you see in a print publication that comes through the post is going to be on the website, usually first in many cases. So when a story is broken, it gets broken online first, and then the print publication is usually a roundup of those stories in the print format and maybe some longer, more considered technical pieces. So that's important when I come on to talking about how you make really good use of any press comments you get. Being aware of the fact it is predominantly online is really important. There's a bit of a blurred line. I'll be careful about how I say this, so I don't want to offend any journalists by saying this. Obviously, we've still got journalistic print media brands, But there's also an awful lot of these publications now doing sponsored content. So they're building what look like news websites, but for investment firms, for consumer brands, for banking brands, that sort of thing. And as far as I'm concerned, this is all press. Now, there's a different angle, different spin on it when it's sponsored content. But if you get a comment out there and it goes into a newspaper or a trade publication, or it goes onto a sponsored website for an audience of banking customers or investment management customers or something, it's still press and it still goes online, it's still searchable, it's still your comment, and it still looks prestigious. So regardless of whether the journalist is writing for a newspaper or a print brand or they're writing for a sponsored platform, as far as I'm concerned, both of those are equally as valuable. And of course, we've got to make this distinction between sort of print traditional media and broadcast media. There's a blurring of lines here as well at the moment. So broadcast traditionally was obviously radio and television. The blurring of the line has really come about now that as well as radio, we've got podcasts. And anyone can create a podcast. Anyone can create a radio station with internet radio, but anyone can create a podcast. In the past few months, we've seen Professional Advisor, FT Advisor, New Model Advisor all launching their podcasts, so they're making big moves into that space. And then television, of course, anyone can create a television channel now. We've got YouTube, we've got Vimeo, we've got all the other streaming platforms out there. So there's real television, broadcast television, whether that's on BBC or Sky or something like that. And there's web-based television, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, etc. And again, we're seeing some of the traditional publications move into that space, creating their own TV channels, effectively on-demand TV channels. So I guess the message here is when we're thinking about what is press, don't pigeonhole it too much. If you're approached for an opportunity to comment on something or appear on something, don't think, well, okay, that's not going on CNN, therefore it's not reaching their entire audience. It's going on their YouTube channel, something like that. Don't sort of dismiss something simply because it's not what you view as a traditional form of press. So the big question I keep getting is how to get started. And my tips here, really, my first tip here, which I've not put on that slide, is start with the trade publications. So we're talking here Money Marketing, Professional Advisor, FT Advisor, New Model Advisor, Financial Planner Today magazine, all of those. And that often raises an eyebrow when I say that to people. And also when I tell people that of those 200 to 300 conversations I have with journalists each year providing comments, probably 80 to 90% of those are in respect to trade publications. Now, why bother? Because you're commenting in the trade press. Are you surely not just speaking to other financial planners? You're not speaking to your potential clients. Now, several reasons why you should bother and why you should start with the trade press. Let's go 3 reasons. Firstly, practice. So if you get used to speaking to journalists who are writing for a trade publication where the intended audience is not necessarily your direct client, you get better at it. You get better at forming opinions about concisely sharing, comments with the publications. So practice is the first reason. Second reason is the journalists who write for the trades very often go and write for the nationals at some point, and they take their connections, their contacts with them. They take a little black book of advisors along to their next job. And then when they need a comment for the Telegraph, the Times, etc., they get their black book out and they'll call you and ask you for a comment. So that's how you do it. You foster your relationship first with the trade press journalists. And over time, and it is a long game, but over time, when they become national press, consumer press journalists or freelancers, they continue to keep their connections. And also, as well as that, the national press journalists look at the trade. They read the trade press to get their story ideas. So case in point, last summer, I had a phone call on a Saturday morning from Paul Lewis, presenter of BBC Radio 4 Money Box, to say they'd just lost a guest for that lunchtime show. And he's been reading FT Advisor that week. I'd been quoted on defined benefit pension transfers, I think it was, and contingent charging. Would I be prepared to come into the studio and be a guest to talk about it? Very late notice, he knew, but actually that's better for me because I didn't have time to get worked up and nervous and anxious about it. But he'd read about it in FT Advisor. He'd read my comments. He knew that I had an opinion. He knew I understood the topic. And that's how I ended up on BBC Radio 4 Money Box that Saturday lunchtime. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, as I mentioned earlier, it's all online now. Whether you're in the FT or FT Advisor, to your consumer's point of view, your client's point of view, to your professional contacts perspective, it doesn't really matter. It's all the same. So it goes online. It helps with search engine optimization. It helps with the Google juice. So when somebody searches for your name or your business name, they find results, in the FT Advisor or Money Marketing or Professional Advisor. That has just as much weight with your prospective customer, your prospective client, as it does if you're in the FT, the Telegraph, the Observer, anything like that. So the online aspect of this is so important. Right, getting started then. Firstly, connect with journalists. And the really good place to do this is Twitter. Most of the personal finance journalists I know, with only a couple of exceptions, are active on Twitter. So having your own Twitter account, making sure you follow them, making sure you engage with them on Twitter as well. Don't just follow them like a weird stalker. Actually, communicate with them, reply to their comments from time to time. Don't stalk them, obviously. Don't get too weird and retweet everything they say or anything like that. But actually engage with them, share opinions, occasionally message them if they've written something and you've got an opinion on it, or if you become aware of a story that's relevant to their worldview, their subject matter expertise. Get in touch with them. Read and be aware of topical issues. So know what's going on out there. This is so important. Because journalists tend to be on very short time frames, very short deadlines, you need to be able to comment when they get in touch with you. So if you know what's going on, so you're aware of breaking news stories, you've done a bit of reading, if the FCA has a policy paper out and you want to be a commentator on that particular area of expertise, make sure you've at least read their press release and you know what the main points are in that policy paper, so you can have an opinion, formulate your opinion in advance. And I'll say there, form and share your opinion. So you have to have an opinion if you want to be a commentator in the press. It's no good saying, yes, I agree, because that won't get printed, firstly. And secondly, the journalists will not keep coming back to you for your opinion on the subject if all you ever say is, yes, I agree. So get off the fence, formulate an opinion. Strong opinions are great. Don't have to be offensive opinions, but actually take a stand on something and say, this is what I believe. This is why I believe it, in my experience, etc. So form and share your opinions. That's really all it takes to get started. There is more you can do. You can, for example, create a media pack on your website. And there's no harm at all on your website having a bit off the about page or off the contact page to say, you're a media commentator, you're a press spokesperson. Here's my high resolution headshot photo. Here's a few lines about me. Here are the different subject matters I can comment on. And really importantly, here's how to get hold of me in a hurry. So out of hours contact details. So you can create a press pack to have on your website. You can direct people you follow, journalists you follow on Twitter to that press pack. The other thing you can do is you can engage with a PR agency. So you can commission somebody, you can engage with a firm like Bamford Media to represent you with journalists, to help you form those connections, to promote you as a spokesperson. And what that will often involve is when a big story breaks, you'll proactively come up with comments which you'll then share and hope get picked up by the press. So you do that on a regular enough basis, and there's some firms who are fantastic at doing this. Royal London is absolutely wonderful. Anything that happens out there, any release of government data about pensions, any new surveys, they will always publish a press release, which is effectively their spokesperson's take on what's happened. And I don't see financial planners doing that in the main, where they could. And if they do that on a consistent basis, they will get picked up by journalists. They will get printed in the national press. And then they'll get approached for more comments. It won't just be the ones they put out there proactively. They can react as well to comment requests. Now, I put out a message on Twitter yesterday asking journalists and people, media advisors, what tips they would have for financial planners who are just getting started. So this was from Emma Lunn, who's a freelance personal finance journalist. And I think she was joking when she said, take us to Wimbledon. We do have to be a little bit careful here, don't we, with bribery and things, but she was joking. But she said, be able to comment fairly quickly and have an opinion. So I've covered the have an opinion bit. The speed bit is really important. So if you're going to be a press spokesperson, you have to be available. You have to make sure you can come back quickly to any comment requests. The journalist deadlines I've seen in the last few months, we're talking within an hour or two in some cases. I've had some which are sort of 15, 20 minutes away because they've moved from print to online. They're chasing deadlines like crazy now. They have to get their stories out before their competitors do. And their competitors are much more widespread than they ever were before. It's citizen journalists as well as real journalists out there trying to compete for breaking news stories. So if they come to you and they have a deadline, for example, you get an email now and it says by midday, get back to them quickly. If you can't get back to them, let them know you can't get back to them. And also have an opinion. Now, I think it makes sense if you're a financial planner and you're in a firm and you've got colleagues to designate one person who is your press spokesperson. And there's lots of benefits from doing this. Firstly, pick the person that's mostly available. So if you have an office-based financial planner, for example, they would be a perfect choice because they can respond to emails and phone calls quickly. But at least pick somebody who's prepared to receive the odd mobile phone call out of hours, who checks their emails out of office hours, who responds quickly to things, who's organized, who's on top of things. So have a designated press spokesperson. You can also then invest in some training for that person. So you can get them familiar with how to deal with journalists, maybe how to speak on radio, how to go on television if that's part of the plan. But yeah, make sure you're readily available. That's so important. Tom Ellis, so Tom is news editor at Professional Advisor magazine, and this is really about how to start building relationships with personal finance journalists. So email them, send them direct messages, let them know if you've got any thoughts on particular issues. It's going back to what I said about Royal London being very proactive with their press comments. So if you start doing this on a regular basis, and again, don't act like a weird stalker, but do it on a helpful, regular basis. And he said there, if they're often available, if they're helpful, if they respond relatively quickly when we get in touch, they're likely to come back. So this is just about building relationships with them. If you pick a subject matter and you start forming opinions on them, start sharing those opinions, actually get in touch with the relevant personal finance journalists, let them know what you think about certain subjects. They will then start thinking about you as the person to approach when a new story comes along and they need a comment for it. So that's a really good one. Darren was obviously the driving force behind the pension cold calling ban. And as a result of that, as a result of driving that parliamentary petition, Darren appeared on an awful lot of media. So television, he was on the BBC Breakfast Sofa, I believe, radio, lots of print stuff. So he knows his onions. Again, availability, be quick. And then this is a good one, be short unless told otherwise. So comments, quotes in the press, we're talking about a couple of lines here. We're not talking about, essays. Be concise, really concise comments. You need to practice this. You need to practice getting your point across, your opinion across as concisely and as effectively as possible, succinctly as possible. So practice your sound bites, and a good opportunity to do this if you know there's an event coming up and you know what the likely outcome is going to be. So, for example, the Bank of England interest rate decisions. We know at the next Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee meeting, the Bank of England is going to hold interest rates at 0.75%, don't we? It's a given. But knowing that in advance, why not prepare a clever soundbite to say what that means for the economy? Because you've got time to do this. When the budget or autumn spring statement come up, then you can do the same. You can prepare comments in advance based on what you think could happen and use the relevant ones. So I think that's a good way. Good tip from Darren there. Sabui Guard, who is a freelance personal finance journalist, make sure you outline your area of expertise and availability. Often we write tight deadlines, as I mentioned. So if you don't respond, if they email you and say, can you comment, you don't respond, they assume something's wrong. So let them know, even if you can't respond on time or if you don't have an opinion or you're not a subject matter expert on that particular area, just a quick courtesy reply to say, thanks for getting in touch, thanks for asking. On this occasion, I'm afraid I can't help because I can't meet the deadline or because I'm not an expert on this area, but I'm always happy to help on other stuff. So that's a really good thing. I'd say on that point, don't try and be a jack of all trades. So pick a particular subject matter, niche it down to get started. So choose an area you're going to comment on, you're going to have an expertise and an opinion on. For me, back in 2002, it was pensions. We had more technical aspects of pensions I got started with. I think my first article I wrote was about trivial commutation back then. So getting into sort of nitty gritty of pensions technical aspects. And you can spread that niche over time, of course, and you can develop other niches. So now journalists will speak to me about regulation, about investing, about retirement, about financial planning more broadly, about marketing. So I've got a number of niches I'll speak to them about and they know me for. But also be very conscious that you'll reap what you sow. So if you comment on a regular basis about debt management, for example, that will lead you to getting inquiries from clients, prospective clients about debt management. It will get you known for that subject. So choose carefully the areas you want to comment on. I've commented on the past on debt management. I've commented on mortgages, even though we don't do mortgage advice here at Informed Choice. So all sorts of things. Just pick and choose carefully the bits you... And journalists will not be offended if you say to them, sorry, that's not really my area. They'll actually appreciate it if you tell them that and you're honest with them up front. You don't just try and fudge a comment for them. And if you can recommend someone else who could help them, that's even better. So if they get in touch, for example, they get in touch with me about equity release, I'll refer them to another media savvy advisor I know about equity release. And that's that's a positive thing to do for them. Right, so what do you do when you actually manage to speak to a journalist, give them a comment, give them an opinion, and they print it or they put it on their website and you get quoted? Now, I think the first thing you have to do is don't assume that your clients will have seen your comment. So I know that these papers have got big readerships. So if you get quoted in the Telegraph or the Times or the FT, that's a lot of eyeballs. But firstly, don't assume that every single reader reads every single word in that paper. They don't. They'll pick and choose the headlines that interest them. They'll just read those bits. And also don't assume that your clients have read that particular paper and then read your article. So do everything you can to use the comment, tell the world about it. Make sure that the people you want to see your comments have seen your comments. So a really good way to do this is to use what we call social media quote cards. I'll show you an example on the next page. But social media in the main, every time you get quoted, you should be sharing that quote on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, any other social media platforms you can think of. You should be adding a blog to your website about it. You should be emailing your client list. If it's a really prestigious bit of press commentary, so it's in the FT and it's a nice big comment, photocopy it. That's probably breaking FT copyright. There we go. Photocopy it. Send it with a nice covering letter to your professional contacts to say, I was in the FT at the weekend. It's worth shouting about. It's worth telling people about. And then also repurpose it into other content. Now, one of the reasons I love speaking to journalists so often, and I keep a log of every conversation, is if I ever get stuck for content, blog content, podcast content, YouTube videos, I'll just go through my journalist contact log and say, what did they ask me about? What was my opinion? And that's the starting point for forming some content. So repurpose it. The social media card I talked about. So few financial advisors, actually, I know one or two others who do this, take comments in the press and put them into these what we call social media cards. So we use canva.com as it's a free online design tool. It's got a range of social media templates on there. And we set this template up with my photo, our brand color, our brand fonts, and our logo. And then every time I get quoted in a publication, whether that's a national one or a trade one, I pick a short paragraph from my comment, I drop it into the template, I export it as an image file. So we're talking about a 2-minute job here of that. And then we share it on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. And all of a sudden, you're taking a comment in one publication and you're multiplying its reach. You can be really smart about this. When you share it on those platforms, you can tag the journalist, you can tag the publication, you can tag other people who are commenting in the same article, and its reach just expands exponentially at that point. So create social media, a template social media quote card. Every time you get quoted in a publication, drop your comment into it and then share it and keep sharing it. And I have to say, the journalists we work with really appreciate this too, because it means when you share this on Twitter, for example, and you put a link to the article with that tweet, more people go and visit their article. I know for some publications, there's an element of rewards and bonuses and things now based on the number of views for each article that the journalist has written. So anything you can do to help send more readers their way, to get more attention, more engagement with their articles is really, really powerful. Right, before I wrap things up, I will open up for questions and things in a second. A few final thoughts then. So availability is so important here. Make sure you give them your out of office contact details. So if you're an iPhone or an email checker out of office, that's great. Mobile phone number is good as well. But be available, respond quickly. I think start with trade publications for all the reasons I outlined earlier. It's great practice. It's a great way to build contacts who may then go to national press. National press look at the trade publication content anyway, and it's all online, so you can make really good use of that. And then capitalize on any coverage you do manage to get as well. So don't just assume that your target audience has read what they've read in the papers. Make sure you spread the word. Make sure you take it, repurpose it, share it on social media, actually make the most of it. One press comment can be 20 pieces of content if you're smart about it. Right, so that's the main body of the webinar this morning. I had a question which came through beforehand. That's from Jessamy Walker. Jessamy said, how do you make the initial approach to be considered as an expert in the future? Is this by culture in a longer term relationship? What are the quick wins? Are there any at all? I'm happy to build, but it would be good not to make stupid mistakes first. And I think that's the fear, isn't it, when we get started with anything, whether it's becoming a media advisor or anything new we try, is making stupid mistakes. I don't think there are too many. I think it's right to be a little apprehensive when you're trying something new. But I'd say to get started, pick a niche. So don't try and be a jack of all trades. Pick something you are genuinely a subject matter expert on. Follow those journalists on Twitter. And we heard it, from the horse's mouth a minute ago. They like that. Follow them on Twitter, engage with them on Twitter, join in conversations, send them direct messages when you've got opinions and stuff. There is an element of this, it being long term. So as I say, I've been doing this since 2002, and I'm still speaking with a handful of journalists I was speaking to back in 2002. So there's no such thing as being an overnight success here, but you can get some quick wins. So you can get a press kit on your website. You can start sending speculative comments, speculative pieces to different publications, different journalists. And if you've got the budget for it, you can hire a PR agent to represent you. And I think doing those things are all great ways to get quick wins. So, Jessamy, I hope that's handy. If you have any more questions, anyone watching this right now, do use the chat window on the right-hand side. It's just nice also to know that I'm not here alone. I know I'm not because I can see the numbers, but use the chat window. Let me know if you've got any questions. I'll go through the final few bits, but I can come back and answer questions if you have them as I go through these. So firstly, dates for the next few webinars that are coming up. There we go. Ian, thank you. Question. Does it tend to be product-led comment? Yeah, okay. So I get where you're coming from on this one. Yes is the answer to that. And actually this year, ahead of the end of the tax year, I made a conscious decision not to follow the usual pattern of responding to comment requests, which was recommend your favorite fund for this type of ISA investor. And I've done that every year, and I've just had enough of it. And I don't think it serves investors to do that anymore. I don't think it accurately reflects the value of what we do as financial planners anymore, to focus on the end solution, the product solution, the fund solution. So journalists are becoming a bit wiser to this. Now, that said, I don't think there's any harm in it being product-led comment. And the reason for saying that is I think often readers of newspapers or publications, they'll see something that they agree with or stimulates their thought, and that might be a recommended fund, for example, or a product. If that's enough for them to pick up the phone and engage with you, and then you can educate them about what real financial planning is, that's a positive thing. So there's no harm at all I think, in starting with a product led. As I say, I refuse this end of tax year, this ISA season, to get involved in recommending my favorite funds for different types of ISA investors, because I didn't think that represented the value we had as financial planners. But yeah, if you go down that route, I don't think there's any harm in it. Keep in mind, under Financial Services Market Act 2000, there is a journalistic exemption. So don't worry about it being a recommendation. It's not a personal recommendation. You can talk about funds in the press, and that's fine. I know it doesn't sit comfortably with the sort of more holistic financial planning worldview always, but if it's a way to hook people into a conversation where you can educate them, great stuff. So, Ian, I hope that helps. Matt's got a question. I used to get quite a bit of media requests, and now I don't seem to get any. They used to all be by phone as well. Matt, I think you've been blacklisted. No, I don't think you have. This has changed. As I say, the nature of this has all changed over time, and for a lot of reasons. But the online move, I think, has made a huge difference to the way that journalists now engage with commentators. The other big change was a few years ago, Unbiased closed their Blue Book. And that was their Blue Book media directory. And that's often how personal finance journalists, particularly the new ones, were finding their connections, and they're starting out. There isn't an equivalent anymore. So it's something we're keen to build here at Bamford Media at some point when we get the time to develop it. But it's hard for journalists to know who to speak to, who to approach. So yeah, Matt, I get very few phone calls now. I get maybe one a week, where I used to get 10 a week. I get them by email now. I get them by Twitter direct message. But you have to be more proactive, I think. You have to get journalists feeling very comfortable to contact you. I've got a handful who are literally asking me for comments every week now, multiple times a week in one case. So they get comfortable. They know you're going to respond. They know you're going to have something meaningful to say, a print-worthy soundbite, print-worthy opinion, and they'll get comfortable repeating and doing that. But they don't have the time to do the old ring around anymore. They're on such tight deadlines. We are talking about emails, Twitter direct messages, LinkedIn messages, Facebook messages. It's convenience now. So that's where they all are. They're still out there. They're actually producing a huge amount more content than they did 10, 15 years ago when it was all print publication. So I think the volume of what they're doing is higher. Therefore, they need more commentators. They need more media advisors to speak to them. But the way they're contacting us is very different. And I have to be honest, they are speaking to a relatively small number of financial planners, because they find it hard to find financial planners who are willing to speak to them, who are media savvy, who know this stuff about quick response, about having an opinion, about courtesy, so about saying thank you when it gets published, about sharing their work afterwards. So they'll find their favourites effectively. And I'm not saying you're not their favourite, but I think you need to remind them on a regular basis that you're available, you know what you're doing and what you're talking about, and you're willing to engage with them and help them out in their mission. Ian said, client's niche or product niche or both? I think probably both. I think, again, going back to what I said earlier about who are journalists, what are they like? If they're not experts in the sort of technical expertise that we have as financial planners. So I think they don't understand necessarily this differentiation between product-led advice and client-led advice yet. Some do, some are getting better at this, but assume that they view financial advice as product-led advice still. I would say start with product niche, and then over time, when you get a better relationship and you can gradually educate them, you can form into client niche and sort of focus on, these are the sorts of clients we work with. But product niche seems to me to appeal more to the journalists we're working with. Thank you for your questions, guys. The next webinar is coming up. So 11 o'clock on Thursday, the 9th of May, all about planning and publishing your client magazine. And then 11 o'clock on Thursday, the 6th of June, how to host a financial planner webinar. So how you can do a webinar just like this for your clients, prospective clients, professional contacts, etc. Why you should be doing that. It's a really, really powerful. The Financial Planner Marketing Summit, I promote this at the end of every single webinar. Everything I do, really, I promote this. Friday, the 21st of June in Guildford, the Electric Theatre in Guildford. Ticket sales are looking really good for this. What I'm going to try and do, if you'll humour me, is play a quick video. This is Michelle Hoskin, just a minute or two, talking about her presentation at the Financial Planner Marketing Summit. Here we go.
Hi, this is Michelle Hoskin, also known as Little Miss Wow. And yesterday I had an amazing conversation with Martin Bamford. So Martin Bamford has organised a Financial Planner Marketing Summit on the 21st of June. Now this is a one of its kind, and I would say the first in financial services. And I'm very excited to be delivering my session, which is all about supercharging your client journey. Now, most financial planners, I can honestly say, are a little bit embarrassed and maybe at times ashamed of their client journey. Maybe because they've not thought it through how they want to deliver amazing outcomes for clients, and also to just give that little extra pizzazz and sparkle to how they deliver their service. My session is going to teach you what the little magic steps are, the little magic moments that can be put into your client journey, which will supercharge it in order for you to deliver something that you are super proud of, but not just super proud of. You can put your money where your mouth is and actually be sure that you have the infrastructure and the team in order to deliver such amazing client promises. So join me at the Financial Planner Marketing Summit on the 21st of June. A special thank you to Martin Bamford for organising what I'm sure is going to be a super event. Be there.
So thank you to Michelle for those kind words. Make sure you get your tickets, fpmsummit.uk, find out more, find out about all the speakers, and to get your tickets for the Financial Planner Marketing Summit, 21st of June in Guildford, Surrey. It's shaping up to be a really, really good day. So looking forward to seeing as many people there as possible. That's all for me for this webinar. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your questions, which is really great. Remember, more information about Bamford Media at our website, bamfordmedia.co.uk. You can follow us on Twitter at Bamford Media, and on Facebook, we're Bamford Media Agency. Make sure on Facebook as well you join the Financial Planner Marketing Community, which is a new private Facebook group where we're sharing ideas, asking questions about all aspects of financial planner marketing. So that's free to join, and you can join like-minded financial planners who are interested in this stuff, getting better about communicating with their clients, about reaching new clients in a really effective way, about using these new marketing tools like Facebook Pixel and retargeting, all this really fun stuff. So that's all for me. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back next month with our next webinar. Thank you.